Okay, you ready?
I'm ready.
Chris? All right. All right, cool. All right, hey, so everybody, thanks again for attending one of the sessions. This is with my friend Chris Demars. He actually spoke at Code on the Beach a couple times. We've known each other for quite a while now. He's one of the developer advocates for Quicken Loans out of Detroit. So today he's going to be talking about Lighthouse, which is a new technology. It's going to be fantastic. So I'm going to record it now, and then Chris, I'll just go ahead and kick you off. I'm actually going to move you to the host now, so you can share your screen. Cool.
Sweet.
Just do me a favor. Just keep an eye on the attendees. All right.
Yeah, will do.
Thanks, buddy.
Yep.
Yep. So now you should be the host.
All right. So I have a gallery view. I might have to switch back and forth, but participants. All right. Let me move. Let me share my screen. Can everybody see my screen here? Let's see. So hold on. Technical difficulties, gotta love it. Can you see my screen?
We still actually see you.
Share this one. Give me 1 second. All right, what about now?
Yep, we got you now, man.
Sweet. All right, let me see if I can make this full screen. Cool, that's fine. All right, keeping an eye on this. I think this is the first, I'm on my work machine, so this is the first time I've used Zoom since we use Microsoft Teams.
Oh yeah.
So
hey, we're all learning as we go, my man. So,
cool.
All right, knock it off, brother.
All right, sweet. So I just want to give a huge shout out to IR Sessions for having me come on, give this little mini meetup talk. Thanks again, Pete, for having me. I really, really appreciate it. As you can see in the background behind me, if you can see these, can everybody see these books behind me? I just want to give a huge shout out to both of these books, The Business Value of Developer Relations and Developer Marketing and Relations. These are amazing books. If you are in the DevRel space, if you're not in the DevRel space, but you're looking to get in the DevRel space, definitely check these books out. This one with the avocados is by Mary Thengvall, and the other one has a bunch of authors. I don't have them memorized, but definitely two great books if you're looking to get into this space. So let me move this forward. As you'll see at the bottom of the slide deck, you're going to see my name and also my Twitter handle, at @SaltandBurnham on Twitter. So if you're on Twitter right now, hit me up, DM me, quote, whatever you want to do. Also in the other corner, you're going to see the developer community hashtag. I love the developer community, and that's why I have this here. The developer community is the reason why I do what I do, why I travel all over the world and speak. I mostly speak about accessibility. I've spoken at Code on the Beach for a couple years. I always had a blast. So that's also a really, really great event. Hopefully we'll have an official Code on the Beach next year. We can all kick it on the beach. But yeah, I love the developer community. I love writing. I love speaking. It's my job now as a developer advocate to do all these things. So when you're also tweeting, if you're doing all that, hit me, tag me, and also throw on a developer community as well. I would really, really appreciate that. My name is Chris. I'm from Detroit, Michigan. Like I said, you can follow me on Twitter at @SaltandBurnham. I work at Quicken Loans, Rocket Mortgage by Quicken Loans. I'm a developer advocate on the dev relations team. We're doing some amazing things. I do a lot of internal and external developer advocacy, writing, speaking, helping the lives of other developers, both internally and externally, just by talking about front-end stuff, specializing in accessibility and CSS. I'm also a Microsoft MVP in developer technologies, a Google developer expert in web technologies, and I'm also a media developer expert through Cloudinary, although I don't have the logo on here because this is an older deck and I haven't had a chance to throw it on there. I used to have another slide and it kind of talked all about me, and I got some feedback from an event one time, and that feedback was like, Chris, we don't care about you, we care about your talk. And it hit me and it feels pretty hard. So I removed it and I was like, all right, you know what? They just don't care about me. That's fine. Whatever. I guess I'm not human. I'm not like everybody else. But I took a hard look in the mirror and I said, you know what? I'm putting it back in whether you like it or not. So a little bit more about me. I'm an international speaker. I'm from Detroit, 313 baby, all day, every day. Come correct. I host a podcast called Tales from the Script. It's a front-end focused podcast mixed with a little bit of horror. And I also love tattoos and horror. I'm covered in tattoos and I have a couple horror movie tattoos as well as a bunch of horror movie action figures and stuff. So if you want to check out the podcast, you can check it out here. You can open it up on Spotify. If you want, I think it's talesftscript.com. That's not it. It doesn't matter. Either way, you can check it out on Spotify. I've had some amazing guests on there. Diana Rodriguez, Gant Laborde, Marcy Sutton, Jeremy Wagner. So yeah, definitely give that a listen. I was in the process of moving when COVID kind of happened. I was in Denver. I moved to Denver last year, just moved back to Michigan. And I was actively recording episodes for this. The virus hit, shit hit the fan, and everybody kind of just stopped doing what they were doing for a while. And I was also a part of that. So I didn't record episodes for a very long time. Then I made a transition and moved back home to Michigan. Haven't gotten my stuff set up yet, but once I do, there will be new episodes coming your way. So give that a follow. You can also follow on Twitter, TalesFTScript. I appreciate it. Thanks for coming to the talk. It's called Run to the Light, Carol Ann, Auditing with Lighthouse. If you're a horror movie fan and you like Poltergeist, you'll understand this reference. Let me see. Is there anybody that is waiting to come in? Let me check. I don't think so. Looks like everybody's still here. Cool. Just want to keep this on deck so I can pay attention. So first things first, what is an audit? Well, according to what the Googles say, an audit is an analysis of how your experience is doing. And what do we mean by how your experience is doing? Well, in the context of using Lighthouse, how is it doing when it comes to accessibility? How is the experience doing when it comes to performance and when it's loading on your users' devices, whether that's a desktop or maybe a phone, maybe a PDA? Who knows? I don't use PDAs anymore, but I'm sure they're still out there. I think BlackBerry's still making them, right? Or even like an Xbox or a PlayStation, or even your in-car units. This is kind of what performance is. Also, you can check to see whether your experience has all of the proper things it needs to be a progressive web app or a PWA. So we're talking about performance. So how your app is loading, what is loading from your application. We're talking about SEO or search engine optimization. Is it hitting all the key points that it needs to be SEO compliant, or with whatever that your application is using on the back end with analytics? We're talking about best practices. So what you can do as the developer to make that experience just a little bit better for all the users that come to that site. Progressive web app. This is another thing I was talking about. Do you have all the key components that you need in order to make sure that your app or your website is a progressive web app? And we're going to get into all of these a little bit later. And then accessibility, the thing that is near and dear to my heart. I speak all around the world on accessibility. That's my bread and butter. Accessibility in CSS. We need to be able to have accessible, amazing user experiences. Everybody needs to have that user experience. So we can look and see how we're doing as far as accessibility goes. This is one of the tools that comes directly from, let's see, which tool is this? This is from the DevTools, and this measures performance. So when you're running your performance audit and you can see where you're scoring, you can open up the performance tab or the networking tab, and you can get these amazing different charts, these waterfall charts, these burn charts. You can sort of dig into all these little pieces. You can see where your paths are, your rendering. If anything is holding up the main thread, which your main thread, your critical rendering path, the main thread is your HTML, which is, in my opinion, the most important part of the experience. But you can drill into these and you can see how long it's taking for this thing to load, or how long it's taking for this image or this JavaScript to load. You can get a painting chart so you can see where the image is, or where the paint starts on the experience, and that goes all the way through. You can see the milliseconds of how long it takes for the paint to happen and how long it takes for certain things to load. This is a really, really, really great chart that you have within your DevTools that you can kind of go back and forth with your Lighthouse score, and the charts that you have within that. All right, let me move on. You can also check out this tool as well, which is really, really great. It's called Web Page Test. And this tool here, and I'm pretty sure that Lighthouse uses Web Page Test under the hood, so you can kind of get the same statistics and analytics behind it. But you can do advanced testing with this tool. You can do simple testing, so you can just put in a URL. So for instance, I'll put in Roughneck's Barbershop, which is a site I just launched. And then you can change the test configuration. Right now it's on mobile slow 3G. You can do regular 3G, 4G desktop. We'll just do desktop. You can run a Lighthouse audit if you want. And then we can start the test. Now, this is going to run a battery of different tests through this experience to get kind of a gauge on where you're at. So while it's loading, you can see that the URL that we have is Roughneck's Barbershop. It's coming from Dulles, Virginia on Chrome with a cable connection. The tester, I'm pretty sure this is just like what it's running as far as a VM, a virtual machine. And there, it gives you a score. Since this is just a single page application, I built it with React. It gets pretty much good scores across the board, A's and B's, security score E. There's not much going on with security, so we don't really have to worry about that right now. But the time to first byte, it comes in at 0.18 seconds. Start render 1.5, first contentful paint 1.487. The speed index is 1.7. The speed index is kind of controlled by Google. There's a certain threshold that they want you to hit. Last painted hero was 3.1. So yeah, this is a really, really good website. And like I said, I'm almost definitely sure that Lighthouse within the DevTools is using Web Page Test under the hood. But you can get the waterfall chart. You can watch a film strip of the video and how it loads on the 1, 2, and 3rd run, the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd run. So it's really, really cool tool. If you're not using Web Page Test combined with Lighthouse, definitely start doing that for all your performance tuning. Another one, we got keyword structure, description, Google Analytics, etc. So this is part of the SEO piece of the testing. And if you're looking for different areas to hit, I found this a really, really amazing breakdown sheet, a simple but effective SEO checklist for 2020. And this kind of tells you the different things you can knock off on your checklist, right? Installing Yoast if you're using WordPress, creating a sitemap, creating a robots.txt file, installing Google Analytics. So when you're running the SEO audit in Lighthouse, it'll kind of give you a breakdown. It might not give you a full breakdown, but it'll give you a breakdown of things that you're hitting with their tests, things that you could look into, things that can change, etc. And this is a really, really good list here to pair with that SEO audit. But the main things you really want to worry about, in my opinion, and I've always felt this way, are keywords, structure, description, and Google Analytics. Keywords, just the main keywords that your experience is. So like for Roughneck's Barbershop, the keywords I would put in there would be Michigan, barbers, barbershop. From my understanding, Google only looks at the first 3 to 5 keywords in that meta description, that meta keyword element within the head tag. So you want to keep those short, but you want to keep it very, very descriptive. The structure, your structure should follow semantic markup, using H1s and H2s and H3s, all your heading level elements, using those properly, making sure you're using the correct hierarchy of that. And that kind of also ties back in with writing semantic markup to creating that accessible experience. Have a good description. If you need to work with somebody from the content team, if your organization has a content team or an SEO team, they might be handling a lot of the SEO stuff and you work directly with them. If they aren't doing that specifically, then you might work with your content team, and your content team can provide that information for you. And it is your responsibility to bake that in. And as far as the GA, the Google Analytics goes, that also might be on your plate as well, or maybe an architect or a data engineer might be handling the Google Analytics to do their tracking and figuring out what their conversion and conversion rates are. So that's the SEO part of it. Like I was saying, for best practices, this is another piece. Proper doc type. So are you using the right doc type within your structure of your markup? Is there no console errors? Different things like that. Those are all the different best practices that we should be doing, we should be cognizant of when we're building these experiences. Security and HTTPS. Are you making sure that you have the right security stuff in place? Are you making sure that you're using secure server over HTTPS over HTTP? A great example is one that I like to use when you're baking in or you're using anchor tags for your links. I'm not real sure how this works in the React space, especially if you're using React Router with, links and stuff like that, the link component. It should work the same way. There might be a couple things you might have to tweak within your React build. But for instance, right here, if you're using an anchor tag, and if you're using a target of blank, that's something you don't want to do unless you throw a rel equals no opener. This right here mitigates and stops for the most part, all the security risk of somebody trying to inject something in a separate window that's opened, or like cross-site scripting, stuff like that. So anytime that you're using a target of blank with an anchor tag, you always want to throw on rel equals no opener. And I think there's also one that's rel no referrer. I think that has to do with later versions or newer versions of Firefox. So always keep that one in consideration, which is right here. Progressive web apps. This is another one. These kind of go hand in hand with the hybrid world. So like if you're using Ionic, you could also make that a PWA. Even if you're not using Ionic, you can turn your website into a progressive web app. It'll be available for all your users, regardless of network connection. They can put it on the home screen with an icon. They can open it up. They don't have to go through a browser. You can remove all the Chrome from the device or from the experience. And by Chrome, I mean the search bar or any of the navigation underneath, depending on which device you're on. You can set up a color scheme or a theme to show up with a splash screen, just like any other app out there. Really, really cool stuff. The way you would set up the PWA or the progressive web app is you'd have a sample service worker JavaScript file. And what the service worker does is that it takes anything that you want to cache essentially, and it caches that as part of the experience. So the way this works, you look for the service worker in the navigator. If there is a service worker, then you load and run the service worker JavaScript file. By doing that, like I was saying, you can cache different pieces of that experience. So if you want the user to see everything when they get a connection, the markup, the JavaScript, images, CSS, all that stuff, you can cache it. It'll be there for them locally. They can still use the experience. And the second they get back onto another connection, it loads seamlessly like nothing ever happened. That's one of the awesome things about service workers. And there's been amazing work done in the service worker space. Another thing you can do with a manifest JSON file is you can load that. You can give a short name like maps or whatever you want to call your website. So for Roughneck's Barbershop, we could just say the short name is Roughnecks and the name would be Roughneck's Barbershop. And then that would show up when the user tries to add that to the home screen. You can also designate icons So you can have different icons for different size devices, which is really cool. So that way you can have that when they do add to home screen, the icon will be directly on their device. They can swipe, find it, open it, and boom. Your PWA is now on your user's device. They can use it just like a regular app. And this is how you would do it. You would just load the manifest JSON file, have it at the root of your directory, and that will, the browser will look for that, load it, and then you're good to go. Accessibility. The one thing near and dear to my heart, and I already said this, and I'm not going to say it enough, I'm going to beat it home. This is super important. I always say at every conference talk I give, accessibility is not a requirement. It is a must. It is a moral obligation, and that term has got, that term, I guess, moral obligation, has gotten me in a little bit of hot water. A few people have been pissed off at me for saying that in our community, but you know what? It is what it is. Accessibility matters. Accessibility is the ROI. You should be shipping amazing, accessible user experiences from the beginning. It is not an afterthought. So when we talk about accessibility, this is a little example of what semantic markup in ARIA looks like. ARIA stands for Accessible Rich Internet Applications. It helps a screen reader read the content of what is there on the page or what is there on the site when you can't use semantic markup. So by that, I mean using a header element. Using the header element instead of a div. You don't want to throw divs all over the place. You always want to use semantic markup first. And the first rule of ARIA is don't use ARIA. It's kind of like Fight Club. But you don't want to use ARIA unless you have to use it and you've exhausted all of your options when it comes to semantic markup. Using a section, if you have different sections on the page, you want to use a section element. That way, this stuff right here, the header, the section, the other little pieces of code I'm going to go through, they're accessible by default. Semantic markup is accessible by default, and that's not something you want to screw up. For this example here, I have a list item, and within that list item, I have an anchor element, an anchor tag with an icon in the middle of it. Now, I know what you're going to say. Chris, why are you using I? I is deprecated. It's been deprecated for a long time. In this context, we're not using I as italics like we did in 1996. The I could also be a span. When you get the code from Font Awesome, if you're using Font Awesome, it's going to be an I element, which stands for icon, according to them. And that's how their kind of API handles that. But within this, you'll see that I have an ARIA label. Now, what does that ARIA label mean? Well, if we just have an icon in here and there's no text between it, which usually happens with social media icons, this is kind of a UX pattern, an anti-pattern, a dark pattern that you see, a common pattern that you see out in the wild. You'll have a list of social media icons, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Medium, whatever the case may be. But it's the icon. There's no words between it. It doesn't say Facebook or Twitter, right? It's just an image. 10 times out of 10, if your user is coming in from a screen reader, they can't do anything with that experience because it's going to read out whatever the image is. It's not going to read out what the actual meaning of it is. It's non-contextual. So in this case, you put an ARIA label. So the ARIA label is going to read to the screen reader what that link or what that button is. So for this one specifically, it would be Facebook. So the screen reader will navigate, well, the user will navigate to that icon. The screen reader will read out, once it focuses, Facebook button or Facebook link. So that's why we use ARIA labels. Let me see, is there anybody that's trying to get into the chat, into the meetup? Nope, looks like everybody is here still. Cool. All right. So we have 3 of these. We have Facebook, we have Instagram, and we have Twitter. And then last but not least, we have footer. We have a footer element when it comes to semantic markup. Now, years and years and years ago, we'd have divs, and divs would lay all this stuff out, and it was not semantic whatsoever. And there'd be ARIA all over the place. Now that we have a footer, we know that, hey, the footer is the bottom of the experience, and we can share this amongst every page. So make sure that if you're doing anything with social media icons, copyright information, anything that's going to be at the bottom of that main block of text within the body, use a footer element. Cool. So how do we audit? I keep talking about all these cool things that you could do with auditing and a tool called Lighthouse, but I haven't actually talked about Lighthouse. So this is it. Lighthouse is built into Chrome's DevTools. I think it's been there ever since the mid-50 versions of Chrome that have come out. Lighthouse used to be a standalone product, but now you can also use Lighthouse in your end-to-end testing, which is really cool. So you can run Lighthouse audits within your test suite, and it'll give you all the errors directly from there. Now, if you're a non-tech person, there's this other tool. It's called web.dev. And let me see if I can go to it. Web.dev. And you can test your site there as well. So you can do, let's say, Roughnecks Barbershop, run audit. This is a really good tool, like I said, if you're a non-technical person. So maybe a business analyst or a stakeholder that isn't really in the weeds with all the development. They can go to web.dev and they can essentially run Lighthouse in the browser. All they have to do is put in the URL and it'll do the same thing here that it's doing inside Chrome's DevTools. So you can see the performance is 18. There are some things I have to fix. I'm working with a buddy of mine who is a performance person, but a score of 97 with accessibility. Best practices is 92 and the SEO is 100. So we're doing okay. So that's Lighthouse. So one of the main things that I want you to take away is when you're doing auditing, always audit in incognito. Always audit incognito, because when you do that, you're kind of giving yourself a clean slate. So off we go to Chrome. Let's open up an incognito window, and then we're going to go to roughnecksbarbershop.com. So the one thing that's screwing up the performance of this is I have this big old hero image, and I had to get the site out rather quickly, so I didn't have time to actually do all the performance tweaking. So yeah, it's loading, but this is the site. It's a buddy of mine. He just opened up a barbershop here in Michigan. So I built the site for him and his sister. Really, really cool. My design, all the things. Shameless plug. All right, so when you're doing and you're running a Lighthouse, you're going to want to right-click on the experience, right-click on the home page, right-click on any part of the page, and go to inspect. Then you're going to find it up here in the top console area where the tabs are, and you're going to go to Lighthouse. So right here is where you can generate the report. Now you can choose performance, you can do PWA, best practices, accessibility, or SEO, mobile, desktop. So we'll just do desktop, and you know what, we'll run all of them at one time and see what happens. So we're going to generate the report. This works on a page-by-page basis. So if you're trying to do your whole entire experience, your whole entire website, it's only going to do the first page. You have to do every single one of those pages separately, which is kind of a bummer. But if you're doing it within your E2E testing, I'm pretty sure it runs the whole gamut through the whole entire experience.
Hey, Chris, sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
Do you have a separate window open right now? We're still seeing your slide deck.
Oh, hell. Let me.
Sorry, thanks.
Yep, no problem. Let me copy that. What about now? Can you guys see Roughnecks Barbershop?
Yep.
Yeah,
Cool.
yeah, we see that.
All right, like I was saying, I couldn't switch back and forth from using Canary in incognito to this, so we'll just do this. But when you are doing your audits, make sure to do them in incognito mode. Let me bump this up. Can everybody see this font okay? I turned the dark mode off for everybody just because it's more accessible.
Looks good.
Cool. All right, so running Lighthouse, like I said, do it in incognito mode. I like doing things in Chrome Canary just because Canary is the dev build. but we're going to do this in, I think this is still Canary. Yep, it's still Canary. But we're not going to do it in incognito mode. We're just going to do it directly in the regular browser. But we're going to do performance, progressive web app, best practices, accessibility, and SEO. So hopefully this works. It doesn't error out on us. We're going to generate, oh no. No bueno. Come on now. I know exactly what's happening. We're going to kill that. And we're going to refresh. Generate report. Is this going to work? No. Well, we might not be able to do this. Either way, we'll do here. No, that's not what I want. Stop. Lighthouse has been acting funny lately. I tried auditing something earlier today and it wouldn't let me. What happened? Nothing. I love doing stuff live. It's so much fun. At least I'm not writing code live. That's where you run into problems.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, let's be honest. The only reason people go to talks where there's live coding is to see the person screw up, right? Like that's the only reason you go to a talk is hope there's some live code happening.
Right.
All right, so this is pretty much the same thing as Lighthouse. Performance, we have a 23. Accessibility, 97. Best practices, 92. SEO is 100. It'll tell you the first contentful paint, 4.2 seconds. Speed index, 5.3 seconds. Time to interactive, or TTI, is 12 seconds. So all of that stuff can be fixed. That's usually caused because of that big image I have. But these are the things you can do for the performance tab of it. Remove unused JavaScript. I'm not a JavaScript developer. I did want to build this in React, so I just used React to build the experience. I'm not using any other JavaScript, but that's kind of funny because it's only using React. So that's a little hit to my JS friends out there. Serve images in next-gen format. So what this is looking for, it's looking for WebP. So I haven't done much with WebP, but my buddy Jeremy Wagner has. He's written a book on it. He's going to be helping me out with this site, getting it a little bit more performance tuned. Removing unused CSS. I didn't know there was any, so we'll have to do that. Efficiently encode images. Cross-site destinations are unsafe. Background and foreground colors don't have sufficient color contrast. That might be the only small thing, and that's because of the blue that I'm using. So let's switch over to the accessibility tab. Yeah, that's really pretty much it. As the colors aren't working, and that's just because of the one blue link, which I have to change. I didn't get a chance to change that. Best practices, it gives you a little breakdown of the best practices, and SEO. So there's nothing. So once you hit 100, and in my opinion, you want to get to 100. Now there is a school of thought, and it's debated in the community that Lighthouse doesn't matter. The scores don't matter. If you have something to look at to see the progress, I think it matters, in my opinion. But you'll see with the SEO, it doesn't tell you that you need to do anything. Because if you're hitting all those things, it'll tell you you got a clean score. You have 0 things to fix. That's why best practices, it only shows 1. Accessibility only shows 1. And performance, it shows a bunch of things. Because these are all things that need to be fixed. All right, let me go back to what we're going to do here. Go back to switch URL. That's how we do things. Boom. And we're back. So we do have some problems, right? The contrast issues with the accessibility. We have some performance problems, large images, the painting not being well. Speed index is really high. So these are all different problems. Lighthouse gives you that opportunity to see what the problems are, find out where your bottlenecks are, and kind of go through and try and fix those, and then rerunning Lighthouse again, and hopefully those scores go up and the errors go down. Solutions. The solutions that we have with the color contrast. Okay, go through the color contrast, see what it looks like, see if you're passing or not, go in and fix that. Another solution for the image. Take that big image, run it through an optimizer like Image Optim. I know there's a handful of other ones out there. That can be a solution for the problem. Clearing out the critical rendering path, using inline CSS to make that load for all the above the fold content a lot quicker. Now I know what you're saying. Chris, it's 2020. It is 2020, right? Yes, it's 2020, March 14th, 2020. And we don't inline our CSS. I know we don't inline our CSS. Trust me. I'm not even a fan of CSS and JS or inline CSS or styled components. But what you can do is for anything that's above the fold, you can take that CSS, load it inline, and then your experience will load that much more quicker because you don't have to clog up the critical rendering path. The CSS is already there with the HTML. And essentially all you're waiting for is the JavaScript to load. And when you put in your JavaScript, you also don't load that inline as well. You load your JavaScript at the bottom of the page, right above the closing body tag. So these are all different solutions to these problems that we face in the real world on the web. And this is just one tool out of many. There is a tool out there called 1,000 Eyes that a company I worked for used. You could drill down to like pretty much IPs and tell where the users were coming, like what their machine was, what their browser was. And that's as pretty much as far as you can get. You can see their connection speed to see what the bottleneck is there. Really, really great tool. And it shows you all the pipelines from all the servers across the country or across the world and how they all crisscrossed to get to your experience. Web page test, like I was showing that one off. Pingdom is another one. These are all amazing tools. But when you couple these with what you're doing in the browser, you can definitely see correlations between certain things. And it's a good starting and a good jumping off point.